that, we're going to get started for the evening. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for making it out here tonight. We're going to start off with a land acknowledgement today. Oakhead University acknowledges the ancestral and traditional territories of the Mississauga of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we live, work, and create. We would also like to acknowledge those who came here involuntarily as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. On that note, welcome to Encounters with Artists. I'm KYRA. I'll be your facilitator for our interview this evening. Encounters with Artists is a year-long research project that delves into the practices of a few established Canadian artists. Over the course of the year, we're conducting a total of 4 interviews, and today, we are proud to be hosting creative chameleon Jim Shedden. We have one last interview scheduled for March, so please stay tuned for that announcement. Now a little bit about our group. Encounters with Artists consists of several upper year OCAD students, with help from Professor Derek Sullivan, MFA candidate Emmett Lewis, and artist Max Dean. When preparing for these interviews, first we do extensive research into an artist's practice, and then we come together to discuss our selected artist. We talk about what we found out, and most importantly, what we still want to know. After this, we brainstorm questions before finally selecting those that we, as a group, find the most interesting. You can think of this as a deep dive into what art students are wondering about contemporary artists today. After our preparations over the last couple months, we are so excited to finally be meeting with Jim Shedden. This project was made possible through the generous support of Lady Elizabeth Pixie Mudge Massey Shaw, who's in the audience tonight. So thank you so much for your generous contribution. Now I'm going to hand the mic over to Billie, who will give us a proper introduction to Jim Shedden and his work.
Tonight we have the pleasure of interviewing the all-round creative powerhouse, Jim Shedden. He has worked in so many different mediums, including music, curation, web design, education, podcast hosting, writing, editing, and producing. Some of his musical endeavors include the podcast 1000 Songs with Alan Zwig and Rick Campbell, as well as co-creating an informal music series with his daughter Meredith. Music Salon series. Jim is also the director of publishing for the AGO and a curator of special projects at the museum. Some of his work with the AGO includes the curation of the exhibition by filmmaker Guillermo del Toro entitled At Home with Monsters, as well as editing and contributing to the catalog accompanying the show Leonard Cohen Everybody Knows, which launched in hardcover with the posthumous exhibit of Cohen's Legacy. Some highlights of his work in film include I Drink, a full-length documentary that showcases the stories of alcoholics and drug users in an unapologetic and compassionate manner. He also directed Michael Snow Up Close, which was produced on the occasion of the Michael Snow Project, a multi-venue retrospective of the now late Canadian artist. Jim has also graciously allowed us a sneak peek into his latest project, Sing Me Back Home, a zine which narrates his adolescence in Scarborough and the music scene in the 1990s. He creates an intimate and meticulously detailed picture of his life before sobriety. The zine reads like a love letter to a lost Toronto, and of course, we will speak a bit more about it tonight. We are so excited and proud to present to you Jim Shedden. Please also welcome our awesome panel of interviewers who will now introduce themselves to you.
Hi, my name is Jason. I'm an upper year, 5th year sculpture installation major.
Hello, my name is SHAWN, and I'm a 4th year sculpture and installation.
Hi, my name is Lucas, and I'm a thesis student in drawing and painting.
So yeah, back to Billie's point, we were introduced to Sing Me Back Home, your zine, which is coming out soon. We were interested in trying to figure out how we could interview you personally. And so we decided to divide up the zine. Please don't ask us how we divided the zine up, because that was kind of short constraints on time. But some of us ended up with different sections, and I guess the following questions are based on the zine. The zine at times comes from a highly personal lens. Do you ever consider the viewer's response during your writing process?
Yes, but it's definitely an indulgence. So I spend so much of my time making professional books about artists and photographers, etc. And I've spent so much of my career otherwise bringing artists into the light for the public, that there are things I do where I just allow myself to be, I have to say, self-indulgent, because it's sort of, it's just a luxury to
For sure.
have to give myself the time and the resources to do something like that.
Yeah, we found that was, again, personal, and in relation to the 1,000 Songs podcast, I feel like that was also an indulgence amongst friends to kind of talk about your personal interests in that sense.
Yeah, and that started as a Facebook group. When in 2007, when Facebook started, and it wasn't, I was getting sober after 30 years of drinking and drugging and so on, and I just, as my head started to clear, I started to realize, to remember that I loved music and remember the things that I loved that weren't alcohol and weren't getting plastered, and so I started to do these kind of love letters to songs that I loved, and I didn't know, it was the early days of Facebook, so I didn't know how people would respond, and I thought I'd do a song a day, but I was on long-term disability then, so I had lots of time, and it didn't end up being a song a day. It took 7 years, so it was a song every other day.
Right.
But people did respond. There was a kind of core of people who, and we got into a conversation, and there were two people, Alan Zweig and Rick Campbell, who were probably, in the long run, they probably wrote more than I did, although for the most part I threw the songs out there. And then we finished, and then in 2014, and then I don't know, a couple of years ago decided we would revisit it. And the theory was I would go back and revisit a song that I posted, and then they would throw new songs into the discussion, and then we would invite a guest who'd throw a song into the discussion. And that's what we do basically. And they don't have to relate to one another. Somehow it all comes together in the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like listening to that podcast and actually reading the zine, or at least the parts that I was encountering, there's this almost like you can just jump in at any point and kind of get an idea of, I guess, your personal take on that subject matter. In the podcast, you actually talk about music as the universal language or a universal art form that kind of speaks to everyone and doesn't need kind of a basis of dialectics or discussion.
Yeah, and it can have that. Of course, there's lots of highly intellectual and analytical discussion of music, but none of us who are kind of running it really come at it from that point of view, although we sometimes throw in, historical, biographical information that we know about an artist, but I think more than any other art form, everybody has a relationship to music. Mm-hmm. And the people who tell me they don't, I think, are lying or in denial, because when you poke them a little, it turns out they have, some song in them from their childhood that really, and it's not true for painting, sculpture, no offense, or books even, or movies, or the other things that I've been involved in. So even the things that we think of as, pretty universal, cartooning and so on, are not as universal as music.
Yeah, I think the second episode really struck to me because it's a song that my dad used to play a lot. Never My Love by the Associations.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, like once that came on, I was like, oh wow, it's a coincidence that I'm actually talking to an artist that finds that similarity. I guess going back to the zine or publications generally, is there a favorite publication of yours that you've done outside of the zine in particular, and why?
Yeah, I was going to bring it actually, but it's the book I Am Here, which I think you guys may have seen. which was a catalog that accompanied an exhibition at the AGO that happened shortly after the pandemic. Although we started organizing it before the pandemic, and it felt pandemic-y, but it wasn't the plan. And as a show, the subtitle one of the subtitles gives it away, which is home movies from cave paintings to TikTok. And it was partially, in large part, inspired by Max Dean and a photo album project that we did at the AGO, which is a whole other story that I found very moving. But also it was inspired by this archivist I know who's collected so far 30,000 home movies, and he's been digitizing them and making them available. He's digitized 10,000 of them so far at 6K and makes them available for free on the Internet Archive. He's a real visionary, this guy. And but it occurred to me that this is, when I was younger, I was kind of like trying to prove myself, and I was really into, hardcore, modernist work and all that kind of stuff. And then as I've gotten older, I've kind of realized that I'm interested in more. I'm just as interested, let's say, in more narrative work in art, but also in non-art, in things that are not officially art, things that become art sometimes when you put them in an art exhibit, when you put it in a catalog, or like the case of the albums that Max Dean collected. They're in our collection now, so we treat them like art. We take, so there's a kind of interesting thing there, but they're in some ways, on some days, they're much bigger to me than Picasso. These I get more out of them, and so that was a show that was really like a three-ring circus, and to be honest, it's my favorite because I really feel like I'm never going to get to do this again. I'm never going to get to do a show like that or a book like that because it's very difficult in an institution to do things that are really out of the box. And so sometimes there's an opportunity and you have to go for it. So I had that opportunity, and I had to kind of, I had to make a lot of compromises and negotiations and so on. But I feel like, we really accomplished something that was not something that you're going to see when you walk in the gallery today.
Right. Talking about the zine, you mentioned insomnia as maybe one of the issues that you may have faced in your personal life that caused sleep deprivation. How has the inability to sleep influenced your artistic choices? When you can't sleep, you often work. What would your work look like if you could sleep?
Well, when I was younger, I romanticized that. I romanticized Andy Warhol's Speed Freaks and all that, and I took amphetamines that are kind of like candies compared to what's on the street today. But I really romanticized all of that, and what I didn't know is I didn't need them because I'm actually manic depressive with an emphasis on manic. So when you take away all the drugs and alcohol and so on, I was left with this personality that was, that had that condition. I also had a neurological condition that untreated makes me do this. I can't, and so I'm treated for both my bipolar disorder, and I'm treated for this neurological disorder with in that case with epilepsy and Parkinson's medication. I have neither of those conditions, but that's just how they tackle it. And I'm really grateful for that because I actually get to sleep most nights now. And I don't really want to be up working.
Yeah.
I don't think the thing is, when you're, like when I was a teenager or in my 20s, I felt like I was accomplishing something brilliant. But now I think I'm better off sleeping.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that because a lot of us are in thesis right now, and you're in the audience. We work primarily with metals, so we're in the metal studio, and I was telling them, so it's almost like 24-hour access at the school, so I'm thinking that you can stretch one day to two, and again, back to that romanticizing of sleep deprivation, I don't think it's really the best thing in terms of longevity.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, like, why would it be?
Yeah,
You know,
not at all.
it's not really, you know. But so I'm kind of over that. I want to be here now.
Yeah.
So I was there and I craved that. And it's the problem with in the recovery world is it's very, people miss the highs and the lows. So
Right.
you know, one of the biggest problems in psychiatry is getting people to take their medication. And the reason for that is because it works. I mean, it has side effects that people don't like too, but they also don't like it because it works. And they want the, you know, and so I get that. And I've been fortunate in that I haven't been too tempted to throw my meds away.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't believe, you know, in terms of creativity and all that, I mean, you know, of course, you know, anything can contribute to someone's creative inspiration, including, you know, schizophrenia and, you know, and intoxication and so on. But when I look at someone like, you know, I just have to look at someone like John Coltrane and go, was he making better work when he was like, you know, addicted to smack and drinking, or when he was sober and when he made A Love Supreme and My Favorite Things? Like those works is all interesting work, but his best work was made when he got clean and sober. And so and there's many examples of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think again, being in art school, a lot of people romanticize the tormented artist, and that they have to work in that direction in order to accomplish something or feel accomplished or have purpose. Yeah, I'm gonna hand it off to Shawn for some curatorial questions.
Great.
Yeah, returning back to your work at the AGO, Jim, as mentioned, you are the curator of special projects and also the director of publishing at the AGO, but it seems that you've worked at the AGO for quite some time now, going back to when you were in university and you were doing programming and coordinating for the film department at the AGO. So I'm wondering, what was that like gaining professional development early in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I lucked out in a way because opportunities came my way, but I was also really driven and I was making connections. So I was, when I was in university and beyond, I ran something called the Innis Film Society, and it was, you know, like any student film society in a way, but at a college that has a film program at U of T. But I wasn't really in the film program. And I kind of hijacked it and turned it into like a primarily experimental film program. And so we ended up collaborating with the Art Gallery of Ontario a few times on some big programs. And so when I was still, I guess, in grad school and working in administration at U of T, I did something with the AGO, and then something else came along. This festival, kind of controversial festival in a way, called the International Experimental Film Congress. And I guess I was 25, and they, the board, who was a 5-person volunteer board, needed a paid coordinator, and I was doing lots of things, so I had sort of the kind of get it done kind of, you know, skill set. Like I was, you know, whatever it was, and they hired me, and it was, and the main, it was a festival that happened at the AGO, at U of T, and at the Rivoli. and mainly, and but the main organization was really the Art Gallery of Ontario. In terms of, you know, they kind of got the ball rolling, and the woman who ran it said, you know, if you just stay on a bit afterwards to take the corporation apart and do the final reports and all that, that would be great. And so I said, so I did, and I quit my jobs at U of T. I was doing some admin jobs there, and but I never did that, because what ended up happening was, you know, she'd committed to doing some film series with some people outside who didn't really know how to do the kind of hardcore, like, you know, tracking down of films and booking them, and, you know, making sure everything got copy edited and all that kind of stuff. Then she got pregnant with twins, and there were some trips that were supposed to be planned. So then suddenly I find myself going to Hungary to put together a Hungarian film series, and all these things came to me. And at this point, I just have this like rolling contract going on, getting paid very little, but I find myself, like, you know, in my 20s and programming film at the AGO, and just, you know, just doing a lot of stuff. And, you know, I was, as I said, I was lucky, you know, I came through, I was really productive. But then we had a grand plan. I'm trying not to get too much detail here, but in the
details are okay. Yeah.
In the expansion of 1993, which was called Stage 3, of which there's very little left, some parts of it, we built, aside from the Jackman Hall Theatre, which is inaccessible right now, but that's the kind of main theater that I was programming, we built a 22-seat film and video gallery, and we built an education theater. And the idea was that in the film and video gallery, we would show artist film and video art around the clock. And we did that for several years. And then we would do other kinds of programs in Jackman Hall and all that. And it all kind of came crashing down in the early 90s because of the recession. Our building was underfunded, the director left, the Bob Rae government got in and didn't quite know what to do with all of this. All kinds of things happened, and the film department as it was killed in terms of a curatorial area. And so I did a number of things in order to survive. One was that we brought the Cinematheque Ontario into the AGO, and they were relatively new. They're officially part of TIFF, as they are now. They're now called TIFF Cinematheque. And so then suddenly my job became administering their presence, but I also collaborated with them on some series to keep that alive. And so that was paying a big part of my paycheck. And they were really good. They were there for 17 years, and you know, the programming they did was super awesome. I mean, I can't, and I was happy to have my little part in it. But then I was also had convinced the powers that be that at the time that I could do other kinds of programming, like music and dance, and the truth is I had very little experience doing that. I don't think you can get away with these things anymore, but I somehow did, and the way I got away with it is no one ever gave me a budget, so it was always like finding people who had money or who had, you know, programming. They needed to do programming somewhere, and I could make the AGO available to them. So it wasn't like the most. It was good. It was really collaborative in a way, but it was really entrepreneurial, to put it that way. And then there were occasionally opportunities to do things that, you know, were about, you know, what we saw as diversity back then. You know, that kind of evolved. And then in my my last year there, or last 9 months, I worked in the contemporary department as what's called an interpretive planner, kind of working on exhibitions and doing public programming and all that. So I did a lot of things from film programming, and then I did install some. I did some film installations. I did a Chris Marker installation. I did a David Rimmer installation, and then we went in the middle of it all, and this was sort of near the kind of winding down of the experimental film program at the AGO. We did this big thing called the Michael Snow Project, and it was the largest focus on a single artist that's ever happened in Canada, and it's ever going to happen. And good for him. So it involved 3 exhibitions at the AGO, an exhibition at Power Plant, ancillary exhibitions at private galleries, City Hall, in the Path, and so on. And I did the film component. I'd say film and video because there are some video pieces, including this big installation called DELL'ANNO, which is an amazing piece that we couldn't quite get to work. So it was kind of it's a long story. It's a brilliant, brilliant piece, but. So, but I was also doing all the programming. So I was bringing in people, you know, like Jonas Mekas and Pierre Berge, and many people who are no longer with us, many Torontonians as well, to do programs here at the AGO and at Power Plant and Music Gallery and that sort of thing. And I thought, man, this is crazy. Someone's got to document this. And I had previously done this very awkward series on, we used to have something called Rogers Community 10. It was like community access cable, kind of like you know, like an SCTV parody. It was very funny a lot of the time. It was very super low budget. Ed the Sock got to start there and stuff. So I'd done this series called Independent Visions with Jim Shedden. and I did these really awkward interviews with people, with filmmakers, and I'd show their films on TV, and that was kind of that. And it's all online, or most of it's online. So I kind of knew I could get Rogers to help out. So they lent me camera people and cameramen, as we call them then. They were all men. And old stock. So I took beta cam, not even SP stock, certainly not digital. And we just, of shows they had done, and we just taped over it. And they let me into the editing suite at night. So basically, I kind of missed a bit there, which is it basically decided I would make this documentary about the Michael Snow Project, even though I never considered myself a filmmaker, and I don't really, even though I've made a few films. It was just like, someone had to do this. And the funny thing about doing a project like that, and it happened, after that I also made a documentary on the filmmaker Stan Brakhage, is you do something like that and it seems that the final product is what really matters. And now to me, it's not. It's all the footage. So I recently purchased digital copies of all of my original footage from Brakhage, which is now sitting at the Cinémathèque Québécoise in Montreal, because it's like someone's writing a biography of him, and suddenly that material is of more value. And we also digitized all of the Michael Snow footage, and you know he's turning 100 in 3 years, not with us, but so there will likely be some Michael Snow 100 projects, and I'm happy that we have this incredible footage, including like performances that he recreated and musical performances that he did and all that kind of stuff there. So anyway, that takes me to the end. That's sort of like, wow, it takes me to 1998, I guess. Yeah.
No, that was great. And I had the chance to actually watch the Michael Snow documentary that you made. And there were some interesting word choices when some of the board or maybe some of the people were describing his work as being gross. Do you recall that?
They were describing the audience at Sky Dome. I mean, I had a panel of esteemed critics, some of whom loved it and some of whom hated it. And its defenders of one defender was Pierre Thibert, who was the director of the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts at that time. He was just like, it was, public sculpture. It goes this way and it goes that way, and it's like, they put on a show and it's whatever. And Michael Snow comes along and he makes this thing and it's mad. It's absolutely mad, and he loves it. He really loved the piece, but other critics were just shaking their head, just like, Michael's not Rodin. What the fuck was he thinking, But I love the piece.
Yeah, I love it too. It brings me back to my childhood, like going to the Sky Dome, which is now the right at the Rogers Center. But, it brings me back that nostalgia. But I actually want to ask you about your transition from working at the AGO and then going to Bruce Mau, and what that was like, and maybe if you could describe what the design house was like for you.
Yeah, well, we were working with Bruce Mau Design. Actually, still exists, but it's not led by Bruce Mau anymore. He lives in Chicago and has another thing altogether, but he was this kind of rising superstar in Toronto at the time. Did something called Zone Books, and then eventually worked with Frank Gehry and Rem Koolhaas, the architects, and Klaus Oldenburg and that. And but around the time that he did this book SMLXL with Rem Koolhaas, which was a real line in the sand and publishing, I guess. It's 1,440 pages. It created a monster, right? Because all architects after that thought they had to have, they had to, like, basically have a bigger phallus than Rem Koolhaas, but mostly they didn't. So that's the problem. They didn't live up to it. But around that time, we worked with Bruce Mau Design at the AGO on 3 big projects: the Barnes exhibit, the Michael Snow project, and the O Canada project, which was I kind of knew from the time I was working with them on the Michael Snow project. I thought, I really like what they do, and I'm not a designer. They were started as graphic design studio and kind of grew, but by the time they were working on this thing called the O Canada project, which was a kind of another 3-ring circus that I got to work on, where we kind of responded to this big Group of 7 show called Art for a Nation that recreated 6 shows from the original Art Museum of Toronto. That we didn't do this exhibition though, the National Gallery did, but we had to take it. And to be honest, it's not something we wanted to really do then. Like, it was the wrong time to do the Group of 7 once more with feeling. And I love the Group of 7, so don't get me, it's just that it was at that time. It was, so we convinced the curator and the director and so on that we really needed to blow it up and to make it something bigger. That invited more of the community in, that allowed for us to explore different ways of thinking of the Canadian identity that were bigger than Algonquin Park and Algoma. And again, I don't mean to be too sarcastic here, but there's a kind of cliche, right? So we did this big project, and I kind of fell in love. It was the first project where Bruce Mau Design were playing a kind of curatorial role and an exhibition design role beyond graphics, and a programmatic role. And I kind of knew at that moment, I thought, I'm leaving here. I'm gonna go work for them, or I'm gonna become a filmmaker. Or I thought, I'm gonna go to Harbourfront Center and program music for real. Because at that time, it was real hype. They were like doing amazing stuff. Or I'm going to go work at the Bamboo programming music. That was a bar. It was a great place. And I didn't do the music thing, really. I kind of do it in my amateurish way. It's still part of me. I made this film on brackage, and when I knew, you know, it happened at the end of my time at the AGO, and lots of things were happening. We had a baby and all this kind of stuff, and it was very successful. Like we opened in Telluride, and we went to Berlin, and we went to Rotterdam, and we were in Sundance. And I remember being in Sundance, just going, this isn't me. I'm not going to do this. And so that only left Bruce Mao Design. So,
which actually.
So I ended up there, and I don't know that Bruce knew why he hired me, and I didn't really know what I was going to do there and that, but we just kind of knew that I would find a role. And I worked there for 12 years, and I kind of did everything from basically being like friend of Bruce, so that people who needed, from inside or outside, who needed to get to him, they could come to me, and I would say, this is what he's going to say, or I'll make sure that he sees this or whatever. I was the VP of development, meaning I did a lot of the business development, which in our case was a lot of like responding to opportunities. You know, when we went out and looked for things, it almost never worked. So it was really a matter of picking up the phone and seeing if there was really an opportunity there. We were very lucky. But our work is what led to that. And then I managed the studio, just kind of everything from just making sure, you know, hiring people and systems and all that. And then I played a kind of creative producer role in the projects. And as they got more and more away from strictly graphic design, I played a bigger role. So I would write, I would research, I would do, you know, we were curating, we were doing, I don't know, it was really hard to kind of define what we were doing. I'll tell you where it went though. The people who do that, I'm not really, you know, Bruce started producing these presentations where he got paid a lot of money to do things that weren't actually producing things in the world. And I started not liking that. Like, by things I mean, it could be events, it could be anything. But suddenly we were getting paid to make PowerPoints. And that's basically, like, we're consultants. And it felt really hollow to me, and I didn't like it. It wasn't, I don't know, that was that all was happening when I was having my own personal crisis though. So I'm not sure how much I kind of overlaid what I was going through with what I saw as the kind of the studio's direction. But it was incredible to go from a public institution that's not actually that entrepreneurial to a place where you have to be productive because you have to pay people and you have to pay rent. And so we're constantly having to produce things, and I really loved that activity, and that it was good for a period of time, and I got to travel everywhere, and I got to work with incredible people. It was really, I mean, you kind of think you know at the time, like how fortunate you are, you know, and then now I look back, wow, that was incredible. But in the end, we had our own crisis there, and we sold controlling shares in the company to an advertising conglomerate. And then Bruce sold all his shares, and I realized I had nothing to offer that world, and I crawled back into the safe womb of culture at the AGO.
AGO, yeah. Oh, well, thank you for that. That was I was always curious, just sort of the global experience that you got to have from working with a design firm like that, and also being like fully immersed in culture, and also things outside of Canada, let's say. I guess to conclude with my last question regarding curation, I would just want to ask what for you is different from being able to curate at the AGO, aside from, let's say, artist-run centers or things a bit more independent outside of big funding programs?
Well, we have more resources, you know, and we never think we have enough resources, but we have whole departments who put on exhibitions. It's the main thing we do. I mean, well, the main thing we do, I suppose, is take care of art, and then we administer thousands of people coming into the gallery. But the other thing we do is we put on a show, and we have lots of expertise to do that. And you know, in artist-run centers, you know, it's usually a small handful, if not one or two, you know, sometimes, right? That's one thing on the set, but on the other hand, we have more pressure to succeed, by a certain definition, and so that that means we can't always be anything we do that's not like clearly going to, you know, produce traffic. We have to rationalize, and it's a daily battle, because we're not all on the same page. So, you know, the people in our marketing department, I mean, you know, you could hire differently. I mean, I might, I'm never going to be the director, but maybe if I was the director, I would say, to work here, you have to love culture. So you have to know why we're doing this. Okay, that's a bigger story than how well we did with the numbers. But we don't do that, because out of fear, I know I'm saying things on camera, it's fine, I don't care. Out of fear, and a couple of things. Out of fear, we hire people that we think are gonna, you know, that have expertise that's gonna push us over the top. And that's not really what happens in an artist-run center. They don't hire like a head of marketing who's not within the art world, generally, right? Because they don't have that same, right, so there's that. So then the second thing is, if you're an artist-run center, your board of directors is generally made up of artists and art-adjacent people. Ours is made up of a lot of provincial appointees, who and donors, and so there's a different power structure, and they and there's a growth model. So I don't think, when I look at, there's no growth model in the artist-run center sector. In a way, I mean, it's not like Mercer Union or YYZ or A-Space said, you know, this year we're gonna add facilities, and we're gonna have an adjunct, you know, place in Mississauga, and we're gonna do this and that. But big arts organizations, they think like businesses, and it's because of the neoliberalist ideology that kind of took over in the 90s after Reagan and Thatcher. So, and I kind of saw that happen at the AGO. You start to think that that you have to run everything like a business, and we kind of do, but to me, I see it as being a problem. I don't know the way out of that, but I'll just put that out there.
Well, I'm just gonna jump. Yeah, it's actually one of our questions is how do we overcome neoliberalism, so as artists, but I guess you don't have the answer right now, but in the future for sure.
I don't know. It's like a really bad time to. I mean, we're not going to get the opportunity to. Seems that the governments around the world are just going to make the decision for us and just just cut culture before we get a chance to answer that question.
So I'd like to pivot now to some questions about film.
Mm-hmm.
And so from what we've seen, you primarily show interest in documentary films. I was able to see a list of your top 100 films, and the majority of them were documentaries.
I'd say experimental. I'd say like artist films, and documentaries. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, what about documentaries do you find so compelling or interesting?
Well, I mostly don't. So I'll just say I like artist films even when I think they're not that good necessarily, because I like films where people are using film as a medium, right? And that can apply to feature films and so on as well. But I like, when, I have a particular fondness for a total engagement with the medium. And then after that, I like pretty personal documentaries, or low budget, I don't like big. I like some big things, but mostly I don't like big. It's like I like documentaries by Les Blank and people who just I don't know, use the camera as a way to record the world and record things they love, or to or things they hate, but just to have to use the medium in a more personal way than and to not it's almost like no the minute I got to know Guillermo del Toro, and he's pretty amazing because he kind of sees through some of this stuff. But when he was working with us on the exhibition, he was making Shape of Water, and it was pretty clear. It was like around the time that we were doing the show, he won the Golden Globe, and then he won the Academy Award shortly after. And he really talked about how there's a curse to that, though, because the minute you do that, suddenly someone wants you to make a bigger budget film, and you kind of have to. But to make the bigger budget film, suddenly you can't work with the quirky actor who was getting paid, a couple $100,000 or less. And suddenly you have to work with someone who's getting paid millions of dollars. Okay. So you seem to have a bigger budget film, but it's being sucked up by all kinds of people who are now getting a piece of the pie and who have all kinds of needs that supersede the need of the project. And so it was interesting to get to know someone, and I've really not met too many people like him, who kind of saw that from inside. And I can kind of, and I just, I still haven't seen Oppenheimer. Like I can't do it. It's too big. I'll see a documentary on him. I've listened to podcasts and stuff, but I can't do it. I can't do the big, and the great thing is now I don't have to, because there was a period when I was like a professional film programmer. Well, even then I didn't. I mean, I wasn't seeing movies like that. I was seeing more, but I might have felt more of a responsibility to know a bit about that. But now, I did see Barbie though.
So in your mind, what makes a film compelling to watch?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's when I feel that there's been a transference of someone's personal vision But I do think at the end of the day, some people have more complex consciousnesses, and so and they're more attuned. They're more attuned to the whether they're a writer or a filmmaker or whatever or an artist, and so that just somehow comes across in some ineffable way. But sometimes, sometimes I can kind of analyze it, but it's never quite satisfactory. Like I can look at a film and talk about someone's use of geometry or, color or whatever, but I always find it somewhat unsatisfying. Like I never quite get to it. I never quite, it's like a task we have trying to understand what makes Gertrude Stein a great writer, or what makes, why, I think it's an important task, but it's never quite, like, why so many artists that were like Andy Warhol and Jasper Johns, but and Klaus Oldenburg, but why did they, I don't know. I think about it a lot. I think about it a lot because I also wonder about, sometimes things are compelling because they broke through at a certain point, and then there's an inherent medium exhaustion, and then you have to reinvent it. So the 19th century was the height of the novel, and so the only way in the 20th century the novel could continue is through characters like James Joyce and so on, who reinvented it, and on it goes. The novel is still with us and strong today, but I wonder about that sometimes working in visual art. I sometimes wonder, like, what's gonna stick? Like, what art has stuck with us since pop and minimalism? That's like a really cruel question. It's like, I have a lot of artists that I like and all that, but sometimes I wonder, like, is this just another artist that we're processing, and they're going to get a show, they're going to get a book, they're going to teach somewhere, they're going to have a career, but is there, did we run out of gas? Did we run out of gas after minimalism? Now I'm I'm a little out of my depth here, but but sometimes I wonder about that, and I wonder about that with film too. Sometimes I think, like, there's like a lot of big moves, and now there's like lots of good films, but is like once you make Pulp Fiction, like in the world of narrative film, are you kind of done? Do we just make like a lot of interesting, enjoyable films now? Is there, I mean, I don't know. These are just questions I have. I certainly know that's true, like in, if I love music first and foremost, and I love rock music ran out of gas a long time ago. It's not like, I mean, there's interesting bands and all that, and I could go watch one tonight, but it's not, it's sort of, it's like little footnotes to, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and the band. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an old guy. I really truly think it's true, like that there's just, that, I mean, I remember now, it's probably a couple of decades ago, but when bands like Fleet Foxes and so on were coming along, I'm going, I mean, we're not breaking new ground here. We're just putting out another record. So I can so I wonder. But you guys are going to prove me wrong. So.
Do you have a personal favorite Canadian experimental film or filmmaker?
Yeah. I get to use one of my props. This is good. I'm coming soon. This is not my prop here. Let's see here. So we just published this book of Joyce Wieland, And this is a show that just opened at Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, but it's coming to the AGO in June. And she's a great artist, but see in the back here, this is a still from her film, one of her films, and Water Sark. And there's a lot about her films in here. And she's one of my favorite Canadian filmmakers. Certainly Michael Snow, Jack Chambers, Bruce Elder, some filmmakers people wouldn't necessarily know as much about. Isabella Prushka, quite, you know, there's a lot of good, it's been a strong tradition, for sure.
What do you think sets Canadian experimental film apart from the other national traditions?
Well, so, you know, I don't know. So Bruce Elder made a very compelling case for this, and it was based on our relationship to the photographic memory, I suppose, and that we kind of bypassed modernism and went straight to postmodernism. And he made a very compelling case in a book called Image and Identity, which is primarily, it talks about a lot of filmmakers, but it's primarily about Snow and Chambers. I don't entirely buy it though, because I've read equally compelling cases where Michael Snow is treated as if he's part of the American tradition of modernists, you know, so making, and that are just as convincing to me. So I'm not necessarily convinced there is. I'm a little allergic to nationalism and the idea that something's inherently Canadian, or even though the case can be made, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know about that. I think you can make, it's like you can make good wine in lots of countries. You don't have to be in France, you know?
Yeah.
I don't drink it, but if I did, I'm saying.
Can you talk a little about your least favorite films?
Well, like Thor. So when I was doing Del Toro, I kind of thought I should get back up to speed with what was going on in the world of high spectacle cinema. Not that he's doing that, but sometimes he is.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's in that world, and those are my least favorite films of his. Or one, you know, the kind of. But I don't like seeing too much money in the movies. I don't like all the noise. And that can be my filmmakers I like. Like I remember watching, you know, Gangs of New York by Martin Scorsese, who I think is one of the greatest American filmmakers. But I just thought when I was watching it, too much money. And now, of course, he's got enough money to make Robert De Niro look like a teenager or whatever, you know, and I don't, it grosses me out. Talk about being grossed out. Like I don't like it. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that is making, he's not making films that are any better than Mean Streets when he had no money. And so I don't like that. And Marvel films are inherently, you know, about money in every way. And it just they ooze that. And they're really stupid. And they're also all about war. And I suppose that's the other thing. I saw Wicked, which, you know, had its charms. I went there, my grown-up daughter wanted to see it, and my wife wanted to see it, and I went along. I like popcorn. The stupid movie ends in war. Like, it ends in a drawn-out, you know, chase scene that is so boring. It's boring, first of all, and secondly, it's like we keep reinforcing this idea that things have to come down to war. And so I don't like that. Even though I do like some war films. I like Apocalypse Now, and I like Deer Hunter, and I like a handful of westerns and so on, which are also about war. But I've sort of had enough. Although I was on a plane recently, and this is the stupidest place to watch a movie in a way, but I rewatched Once Upon a Time in the West by Sergio Leone, and I mean it's a very violent film, and I had this kind of epiphany. I just thought, oh, this is one of the greatest films of all time, and I'm seeing it on this little plastic, screen in front of me with my legs kind of, twisted around, but I could still see that it was one of the greatest. So, yeah.
That kind of pivots into this question. Do you think the rise of streaming platforms and the sort of the accessibility of films today, do you think it helps or hurts the notion of the experimental film?
Well, it helps in that inevitably more people know about. Look, like I like when people have access to things. The fact is, you can listen to anything you want today. I think that's good for the most part. I like that you can read anything you want today, and I like that you can watch a lot of movies today. There's still a lot of things that are harder to see. I think that's generally a good thing. The conditions in which we watch them, of course, we watch, YouTube, whatever, like crappy transfers on our phones and so on. I don't really like that, but I think overall that's preferable to the days when I only knew about films as rumors, but I myself only really like to watch films in the movie theater and on planes, obviously. But no, I can't. I'm really restless in front of a TV screen and let alone my computer. So I really like, and so I don't watch a whole lot of movies, but when I do, I really like to be in a movie theater. Yeah. So, but I accept that if I instantly want to see something or want to see 30 minutes into some movie or whatever, I can go do that. I think I really like that. Okay. Yeah.
I just want to follow up with that because I'm just curious if you feel the need to keep up with the latest inclinations of society and culture and just going to see new art shows or whatever is mainstream in media, because in the zine you had mentioned you weren't compelled to actually watch a lot of new work, but at the same time you didn't want to keep closed-minded. So is there a balance?
There's a tension. I feel like my my hard drive is pretty full, and I don't want to and so it's hard to put new things in there and be really open to them. So I'm really glad that I watched as much and read as much and listened to as much as I did. But at the same time, given what I do in both my work and my other things, I'm just constantly taking in new things. For example, in the publishing side of what I do, which is about half my job there, I don't generally choose what I worked on this project in a number of different ways, and will as we roll it out in Toronto. But generally, I'm not. It's just like, oh, we're doing a project on impressionism in industry. I don't get to choose that, but then I have to learn about it as part of what I do, and I really, really enjoy that. And so I'm constantly being exposed to things. And then having someone like my daughter in my life too, like she's really into whole sides of culture that, like she's a musical theater person, and and I wasn't. So I see, like on Sunday, I saw Just for One Day, a musical about the Live Aid benefit. I would not have ever seen that. And it's not brilliant, but it was actually pretty good, you know. And I wouldn't. So I'm forced to have an open mind, and I'm happy about that.
I guess, yeah, just to bring it back to a bit more home and personal. When I was watching I Drink, your documentary that retells the stories of people that are dealing with alcohol abuse and addiction, there was a moment where you also shared a bit about your experience with that, and there's a quote that you said where for you, alcohol was a way for you to deal with people. And I'm wondering, that as a question now, how do you deal with people currently?
Yeah, I have a fundamental fear of people, but I worked on it, so it's not as pronounced. So yeah, that's the film, by the way. I started out making about people I knew in the recovery circle, and then I asked my sister and my father, who were both in recovery, if they would be in it, and I thought they would say no, and they said yes. So then I realized I had to be in it, and then it sort of, and I was pretty central in the end. My story and the co-maker's story is kind of has its. I'm pretty happy with it, actually. We made it, you know, some time ago, but when I say in recovery, like I still go to at least 3 AA meetings a week. I sponsor people in AA. I have a sponsor. I try and, you know, there's a program of action in there that I try and take seriously. I try and do service within AA outside of that, just kind of doing the humble things of setting up meetings and that sort of thing. And I find it works, and I find I'm forced to be with people with whom I wouldn't normally mix. Right? It's one thing to hang out with like-minded art people and so on, but in AA, it's a mix of people who might even vote for Doug Ford or something, you know. But really, in the rest of my life, I don't. You know, it's like a monoculture. Like I don't know who those people are who are gonna, you know. It's not. But when I'm in AA, I realize we try to avoid that kind of controversy, but I realize I'm dealing with people from all walks of life, and so I get to appreciate them as humans, and sometimes I get close to them, and sometimes I see them come and go. There's a lot of that, and I see what happens to people who don't keep up the work in the program, because it only, you know, I could just grab a drink. It would only take me that. It would only take, you know, a split second, and I'd be, you know, and then my brain would be rewired back to where it was 17 plus years ago. So that's part of it. Yeah, I kind of see a lot of tragedy. I see a lot of people just struggling, and but then I also see a lot of people who you know, like the guy who sponsors me. All I'll say about him is, like, when he came in, he had really totally fucked up his life so badly, and he was in jail, and he'd been, like, he had such a horrendous DUI and all that, and he just could not make it. And he's my sponsor now, because he did it. He did what you're supposed to do, and I thought, you know what, this guy's, I really admire him, and he's really inspiring. He's really motivated. So that's how I do it. But I do think I'm fundamentally hardwired to deal with some of my character defects through you know, through crappy behaviors. So I try not to do that now. So yeah.
I always talk with Jason, or we talk about having vices. in that you sort of, everybody seems to always have one vice that they need to sort of find like some moral virtue in them. And yeah, I guess maybe what is that like now? Maybe is there like a guilty vice that struggle?
Nothing I find any moral virtue in. I mean, like self-righteous indignation. I have a lot of that, but I'm not proud of it. It's just a kind of.
Wait, oh, sorry, maybe to rephrase, but to sort of find something new within you, like a vice that like sort of motivates you to find, it gives you reasoning, right? Like a nice.
Well, I'm overweight, so somehow I've consumed too much sugar, and not counterbalanced it by doing enough exercise. So, but I keep going to the doctor. I mean, I have issues, right? But I was at a doctor because I was on lithium for so many years. I screwed up a kidney, so I'm on a different drug now. But now they have to monitor my kidneys, so they look at everything. And so I went to the doctor, and it's like, oh, you have 129/80 blood pressure. Your blood sugars are totally fine. Your cholesterol's fine. Like everything's fine, even though it shouldn't be. But I kind of know that I'm getting, like, I have a big problem with getting away with things, and that's how I managed to drink and drug for 30 years, because it didn't totally take me down. So I kind of like, oh, I got, I got a get out of jail free card, like literally. Or I went through university, got my master's, and got a job, and then, did things I didn't ever want to do. I got married, I bought a house, had a kid. I thought I was never going to do those things, but I did all those things. So I kept thinking. So there's a part of me that was like, now I'm even renovating the house. So like it's like really, it's really middle class, right? But. And I have a job, and that I like, that I've always loved my job. I've been really lucky. But at the same time, I was living this kind of double life, and it became really untenable, physically and emotionally and spiritually, but I still always feel like there's something like that I'm getting away with, something in my life that I should be living. But I don't. This isn't torturing me.
So a vice has to be torturous, I guess, in the mental state. Just because we were in the conversation and we were thinking, like, what is your vice? Just in conversation with the person who had said that you just need one vice in your life and you should be good for everything else. We were thinking like the idea of desire as a vice potentially, just because desire is like, as artists, you want to make it as an artist, you want to be able to sustain your practice and whatnot, but like, that's kind of potentially debatable, I guess.
Well, I think that leads me to the word ego. So that might be a big vice.
All right.
That I have a bigger ego than I'll admit, that I'm driven to do things, I say on my own terms, but I'm pretty, I want a certain kind of recognition. Not like, not that recognition, but certain kind of recognition.
Right.
It's not ultimately that healthy.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that because Max told us to leave our egos at the door just before this interview, so it's good to know. Actually, I'm tempted to drop the questions and see what's in the bag, because I feel like there's a lot of props and we have to kind of like ask the right questions to get to them.
There's not a lot of props. I didn't really know it. There's not a lot. I just tend to. There's only this is another book that we produced that we haven't. This and I brought it because it's kind of big and crazy and it lies flat, and it's this is called Arnold Newman's Magazine World, and we did this show at the AGO, and we couldn't, between me and the photography curators, we couldn't get the upper echelon to agree to let us do a book, even though it was a big show, and we have like 1 billion photographs by Arnold Newman in our collection, and it's popular. It's easy to like, you know. He's great. So then the show, a few years later, the show, it traveled to Korea, where it's at this photography museum there called the Hanmi Museum, and they do a book for everything, and they're really adventurous, and they're very fast at producing books, and so they said they wanted to do a bilingual book, and we knew that Eric Newman, the son of Arnold Newman, would contribute to it, so that we could have copies, so that we could make it available. So we kind of, I'm just going to say this on camera, I'm not going to say we pulled one over, but we got away with it, because the institution said we weren't going to do it, and we said, how about if they, they do it, we help them, because we had to do all the English editing, and we had to pull all the image, it's all our writing and all that, it's our work. So we got to pull off this book, and because it's bilingual and because they're so generous with the images, it became this like book, like on the scale that we would never have produced. So I brought that as a kind of, just like, who knew? So that's one prop, and it has David Hockney on the cover. It's very nice, and this cover, it's like a plastic cover that comes off, and it's got an open. It's very groovy. It's a little too groovy, and the cover doesn't quite work, but you can take a look at it after. So I brought that because it hasn't quite hit the stands yet, as they say, and it's sitting on a barge waiting to come in from Korea, and then it'll be distributed. Everything we do is distributed. And then I brought another prop, which I think you guys have seen, but I thought this, you guys have seen this, right?
Yeah.
So has everyone seen this? Okay, well, I'll unfold it. But just because it's a thing that has kind of grown into when you talk about the zine, me and a partner at work, she's like a production coordinator, and we worked together for a long time, and I would get approached by people outside the AGO to do books and say, hey, I want, like for example, the former director of the AGO, Matthew Teitelbaum, approached me about doing a book on his father, Machel Teitelbaum, who was a painter, manic depressive, he said, I want a Jim Shedden book. I need to honor my father properly. He had such a fragmented career and so on. So I agreed to it, and about halfway through, I asked Robin to join me on this journey with our former boss. It was like, oh, man, I thought Matthew was out of my life. But anyway, but also that I realized that we were increasingly having these opportunities. So we created a sidebar publishing collective called Workbook. And so the zine you're referring to is also a workbook project. So we'll do books, we're like midwives of other people's books, and then we're going to create our own books. But in that latter category, it kind of started with this thing, which I'll hold up. I may need to stand up though. It's called DIY Toronto, 1975 to 1989. Oops, making some interesting noises here. And basically, here, it's better if I stand, and I'll just yell, because we're getting, I grew up, I went to high school from 1977 to 82, which was the punk era. And it was also kind of blossoming of the Artist Run Center era and zine, and I was making zines then. And I thought one day, I started becoming obsessed with Toronto, as I still am, and I wanted to kind of map it in a really informal way. Like, I didn't really think about this too much. I just started writing out categories of people, places, and things that made Toronto DIY history. And I called it, I said, DIY Toronto 1975 to 1989 is a subjective and almost random listing, an attempt to describe that period in Toronto's history when every realm of activity, of creative activity, this is a run-on sentence on purpose, was distinguished by counterculture tendencies. Punk rock, experimental music, artist-run galleries and collectives, underground theater, avant-garde film, small press poetry, and postmodern dance. Very little of this activity registered on mainstream media's radar. Instead, the burgeoning alternative art scene was represented in zines and other less than profitable publications, tabloids, street posters, community radio shows, and word of mouth. So then people asked me if I was going to do a sequel, but the reason I chose 89, so 75 is like, it's the end of hippie culture. It's the beginning of nihilist culture in a way. And Watergate's over, and Vietnam is over, and Boston is at the top of the charts, and you have kind of like, it's sort of pre-punk in a way. And but 1989 is when the code for the web was written, and it's also when the first real, I forgot the name of the chip, but the digital chip that allowed for like the DV cam kind of cameras and that sort of thing. It was also Tiananmen Square. It was also the fall of the wall. So the world was changing in lots of ways. But on the DIY front, it felt to me that in a way we were all becoming DIY in 89. What wasn't clear is that we would all become DIY within a corporate bubble. So even when I did this, it wasn't as clear. So you don't have to, but had there only been a Wikipedia of social media, then the world might have been a different place. There is Wikipedia, and there is the Internet Archive, which is, if you don't know about it, it's one of those like best kept secrets online. There is a kind of world of DIY culture online, but so many people like myself built this sandbox in Facebook, and I have 17 years of conversations there and 5,000 connections, and I have every other platform, Blue Sky, and everything else, and I'm kind of stuck on Facebook. But anyway, going back to this, I kind of I thought I would do a sequel, but the sequel turned into this thing that became much more personal, this zine, which I only made 150 copies of it, and I'm distributing it to a list of people primarily this week, and then I'm going to do a second printing. And it's only going to be sold at, I'm going to give it away, and I'm going to sell it at like Spacing Bookstore and Art Metropole and maybe one or two other places. But unlike the other things I work on, it's too weird for, it's really weird. Like, it's a strange thing. So it doesn't have a kind of mass appeal, but at the same time, it is a kind of document of Toronto. From a particular point of view, and everybody has their own point of view, their own particular history. So yeah.
Speaking about your zine, in the zine you mentioned that you're really close friends with McAllister, especially during your time with Bruce Mel Designs. We had the pleasure of doing a McAllister interview for the first one, and he had this analogy about horse racing. And in horse racing, there's first place, second place, and the also ran for all the folks who didn't place one or two. And he had a desire, I guess, even talking about ego earlier, he had a desire still to kind of bring the scope of his practice to the international level, even though he is already international, but also like maintain that. And referring to a quote you said in the first podcast, you said, referring to your love of music, I guess, I just had this need to be special, and I still do, which you know is kind of an illness. I wonder if like you have that desire to bring the scope of work beyond what it is that you currently do or have ever done.
So are you asking me if I still have the need to feel special?
Well, I guess everyone has the need to feel special, but I guess in your practice as an artist curator, all of the above, are you thinking about taking it to another level that you haven't previously visited before?
Not in terms of like recognition, or I want to do interesting projects, and sometimes to do the most interesting projects, you know, for me, they have to be things that are not necessarily going to be the biggest or the I'll give you an example. So I'm the coordinating curator of this exhibition coming up of Paul McCartney photographs. These are photographs that he took the beginning of Beatlemania, 63, 64. And I'm honored as a huge Beatles fan to do this show, but it was organized already by the National Portrait Gallery and McCartney Productions. And we get a little bit of leeway. And I'm going to add a Toronto component to it, Beatles and Maple Leaf Gardens, 64, if I get permission. Because Sir Paul has to actually approve everything. And it's going to be a huge show because people over 60 didn't die, and they still go to art galleries. And younger people know who the Beatles are, so it's going to be huge. But we don't really have much room to do anything. So there's a part of me that wants to do, like I'm really, really honored to do that, but I'm in a way, I really want to do things where like things like I Am Here, where it was like an invention. It was like it was weird. We got to be weird, you know. So I'd rather. So I want to do that. I don't see. And I want, you know, of course it would be great to do things that travel internationally and all that kind of stuff, but I kind of know how unimportant so much of it is. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not that important. None of us as humans is that important, and in the art world we're really not that important. So I kind of need to remind myself of that. And so what are those? I have, for example, something I learned from Bruce Mao, but we had we were against awards. We didn't apply for awards, except once we did. But anyway, I had a rule like that at the AGO, like we're not applying for any publication awards, and I've totally given in because everybody else wants them. Our co-publishers want them. Curators want them, and they don't mean anything. Just like the Oscars don't mean anything. That's this Sunday, right? So they're toxic, and so there's looking for that kind of recognition is fraught. I'll give you an example. We applied and won for the Toronto Book Award for moving the museum. I won't say too much about this. A book that was written by Georgiana Yuluruk and Wanda. Some of you know Wanda. And Wanda left the gallery shortly after, and everybody signed, you know, non-disclosure agreements. We don't exactly know why. But the whole thing was kind of tainted. Like, it was an award that suddenly, we couldn't really, for something we worked on for years, and one of the co-curators was no longer able to really talk about it, was no longer at the AGO. We couldn't really own it in the same way, and the award felt really, really weird to me. And we would have been better off without the award. And I don't know, they're just, I don't know, I don't know what, I'm not an artist the way, so by the way, I feel honored to be here because I like the term cultural chameleon or something that was said at the beginning. That was great. So I like that, but I'm not an artist the way Mike Alexi or Max Dean is an artist in a way. So, but I suppose I have characteristics that are similar, but I don't really think about, I don't have to think about my career the same way. Because it's too weird. Like this is so marginal, and I know it's marginal. And this is a little bit less marginal, but it's pretty marginal. Like books are, I'm just kind of aware of that, like all the things that I'm involved in. I show experimental films in a room. I mean, sometimes we use a bigger theater, but we normally use this room that seats 39 people. It's totally marginal, and I'm perfectly happy with that. The podcasts we do, I don't know. I mean, I think you guys are the only people who've heard it, I mean, that, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. So
it seems like you're gonna be staying in Toronto, or you're pretty okay with sort of settling and like building here and like home base.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna move anywhere. Although I do. When I travel, I often hate Toronto, and then I have fantasies about being somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, sometimes it's not a good time to admit it, but sometimes that's. I have some favorite American cities, and I have like friends. Like I love New York. I'd be happy to be in New York in a way, and I love San Francisco, and I go there a lot, and I just think, wow, there's a lot going on here. I have a lot of friends there. I like the weather. I like, I was in Barcelona about a year and a half ago, and I just thought, fuck, everything about this city, that was definitely I hate Toronto moment. It was just like, it was like every detail about that city. Kids playing on the sidewalk at 3 a.m. was like incredible. That they had huge sidewalks was amazing. That there was just like food everywhere, and it was just like, the architecture, the planning, the history, the culture, the kind of, I don't know, it was just, and I've had that experience, in other cities. I was in Montreal recently, a lot of snow there, and I could live in Montreal. They wouldn't have me because my French is so bad and all that, but so I'm not a Toronto chauvinist, but I've basically lived here all my life. The only experience I've had not living here is when I was at Bruce Mau. For a period I had an apartment in Park Slope in Brooklyn because I was in New York all the time. So I kind of had a little bit of that flavor, and I loved it.
Okay. That's great. I've been given a note that we have to conclude, but I actually just want to ask maybe one question, and on a positive note, what are some of your favorite things about Toronto?
Well, some of them are cliches. Like I think it is this. I forgot the name of the book. There's this guy, Sean McAuliffe, who was spacing and writes for the Star and all that, and he has a book on. He's basically a flaneur, right? And he walks around the city, and he walks every neighborhood, and and it's really delightful to read that and listen to it. He has a new version, but I don't think there's an audiobook version of it yet. And I'm kind of reminded of how rich the city is, and there's parts of the city that I don't really know at all. So I love, yeah, I love all the neighborhoods and I love the hidden. I think the problem with Toronto is if you came here as a tourist, you would probably end up at, staying at the Chelsea Hotel, and you'd go to the Young Dundas Square, and it's like horrible, and you would need a guide. You would need someone like Sean McAuliffe or maybe me to say, no, let me take you to this place in the Junction, and now we're going to go to the Review Cinema, and now we're going to go. You want to go thrifting? We can go thrifting. You got to see Kensington. You got to go to Scarborough for, Afghani food or whatever. There's like it's a lot of work. It's not a. Whereas a city like Montreal, you just go there and you walk up Saint Laurent, and you're going to be fine. You're going to eventually run into all the shit that you've heard about. You might have to go a little bit this way or a little bit that way, but it's an easy city, right? So Toronto is not an easy city. So I like the hidden elements of it. I like University of Toronto, where I went to. I love walking around there. I love the parks. I live near Courttown Common, which is like a 4-acre park, which is built on toxic sludge, and it's totally fantastic. And I love some of the older parks. I love Trinity Bellwoods, and I love High Park and Dufferin Grove and all that. So I think that there's a real. I don't buy records anymore, but I love that we have 1 million record stores, and I don't know. Just there's like a lot of. It's a good city. Yeah.
Okay, wow, great. Thank you so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure interviewing you. And
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Just to close off tonight, we just want to say thank you all